My name is Sandra. I'm 76 years old. And 3 weeks after burying my husband of 34 years, I discovered something that nearly destroyed me. His entire pension, every dollar we'd saved and planned our golden years around, was legally going to his ex-wife. A woman who hadn't spoken to him in 28 years. She thought I'd just accept it. Roll over like some helpless old widow. She was dead wrong. Robert and I met in 1989 at a community center dance. I was 41, recently divorced myself, working as a school secretary making $18,000 a year. My first marriage had ended badly. My ex-husband was an alcoholic who spent our savings on gambling. I was raising my teenage son Danny alone, living paycheck to paycheck in a tiny apartment. Robert was 45, a factory supervisor at Detroit Automotive, manufacturing, divorced with 2 grown kids, Michael and Sarah, who lived in Oregon. He was lonely, cautious, still healing from his own painful divorce. His ex-wife Linda had been controlling and vindictive, always threatening court battles, over money, property, anything she could weaponize. Our first dance was to Unchained Melody. Robert was nervous, kept apologizing for stepping on my feet. I found it endearing. Here was this big, strong man who managed 200 factory workers, fumbling like a teenager at his first dance. We dated for 2 years. Every Friday night, we'd go to dinner at the same little Italian restaurant. Every Sunday we'd walk through Belle Isle Park, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Robert would bring flowers. Not expensive roses, but daisies from the grocery store, because he remembered I'd mentioned liking simple things. I fell in love with his kindness first. The way he'd listen to me complain about difficult parents at school conferences. How he'd help Danny with his homework without being asked. How he'd hold doors for elderly ladies at the grocery store. Not because he was trying to impress me, but because that's who he was. Robert proposed on Christmas, Eve 1990. No fancy restaurant, no dramatic gesture. We were sitting on my couch, watching It's a Wonderful Life. And during a commercial break, he pulled out a simple gold band with a small diamond. "Sandy," he said, "I'm not good with words, but I love you. I want to spend whatever years I have left making you happy." We married at the courthouse in February 1991. His kids flew in from Oregon. They were polite but distant. My son Danny, then 17, walked me down the aisle in his borrowed suit. The ceremony lasted 10 minutes. We honeymooned for 1 night at a Holiday Inn, then came home to start our real life together. Robert moved into my little house on Maple Street. It was cramped. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough for both of us. But we made it work. He'd get up at 5 a.m. for his shift at the plant, always kissing my forehead before he left. "See you tonight, beautiful," he'd whisper. Danny graduated high school that spring and joined the Army. Robert treated him like his own son. Never trying to replace his father, but just being a steady, positive presence. When Danny shipped out to Germany, Robert cried harder than I did. By 1995, we'd saved enough to buy a proper house. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a real dining room. Robert spent weekends painting, installing new fixtures, building a garden, shed. I'd watch him work in the yard, dirt under his fingernails, completely content. We talked about retirement constantly. Robert had started working at the plant in 1978, contributing to their pension plan. By the time we married, he already had 13 years in. 22 more years, Sandy, he'd say, showing me the pension projection statements. Then we'll have $4,200 a month for life. We can buy that cabin up in Traverse City, fish every morning, read books in the afternoon. We lived modestly to make that dream real. Robert drove the same pickup truck for 15 years. I clipped coupons, shopped sales, Made coffee at home instead of buying it. Every extra dollar went into savings or house improvements that would increase our equity. The pension wasn't just numbers on paper to us. It was security after decades of financial stress. It was the promise that our old age wouldn't be spent choosing between medicine and groceries. It was respect for the 40 years Robert planned to give that company. Robert's first heart attack came in February 2019, right after his 75th birthday. He was shoveling snow from our driveway when the pain hit. I found him collapsed against our car, clutching his chest. The cardiologist was blunt. "Mr. Patterson, your heart is severely damaged. You need to retire immediately. No stress, no physical exertion. If you want to see 80, you need to slow down now." So Robert retired that spring, after 41 years at the plant. His pension kicked in immediately, $4,200 every month, just like they'd promised. We were finally going to have our time. We had 3 beautiful years. We bought a small camper and visited national parks. We took up ballroom dancing again. Robert learned to cook. Terrible attempts at first, but he kept trying. We'd sit on our back porch every evening, drinking iced tea, planning our next adventure. The second heart attack took him on March 15th of this year. Massive cardiac arrest while he was working in our garden, still holding his coffee cup. The paramedics said he didn't suffer. One moment he was alive, planning which tomatoes to plant. The next, he was gone. The funeral was everything Robert would have wanted. Simple, dignified, full of people whose lives he'd touched. His kids flew in from Oregon. They'd grown closer to us over the years, visiting every Christmas, calling weekly. The entire neighborhood came. Former co-workers, people from our church, parents of students I'd worked with over the years. I was barely functioning. Robert's daughter Sarah handled most arrangements while I sat in our living room, staring at sympathy cards, unable to process that he was really gone. People brought casseroles I couldn't eat. Flowers that made the house smell like a funeral. Home. 2 weeks after the burial, a thick envelope arrived from Midwest Manufacturing Pension Services. I assumed it was routine paperwork to transfer Robert's pension to me as his widow. Every married couple knows that's how it works. When one spouse dies, the survivor gets the pension. It's basic security, the foundation of retirement planning. Opened the envelope while drinking my morning coffee, expecting forms to sign, maybe direct deposit information to update. Instead, I found a letter that stopped my heart. Dear Mrs. Patterson, we regret to inform you that pursuant to the beneficiary designation on file, Mr. Robert Patterson's pension benefits will be transferred to Ms. Linda Morrison, designated beneficiary since September 1987. Final payment to your household will be April 30th. Please contact our office with any questions. I read it 3 times before the words made sense. Linda Morrison, Robert's ex-wife from 28 years ago. The woman who'd made his life miserable, who'd threatened him with lawyers over every penny, who hadn't spoken to him since their divorce was finalized. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the coffee cup. It shattered on the kitchen floor, brown liquid spreading across the white tiles like blood from a wound. I called the pension office immediately. The hold music played for 23 minutes. I watched the kitchen clock, counting every second. My heart pounding so hard, I thought I might have my own cardiac arrest. Finally, a woman named Janet answered. Kind voice, professional but sympathetic. Mrs. Patterson, I'm so sorry for your loss. I have your husband's file here. How can I help you? There's been a mistake, I said, my voice barely steady. This letter says his pension is going to his ex-wife, but I'm his widow. We were married 34 years. I understand this is shocking, Mrs. Patterson. Let me review the file. Yes, I see here that Mr. Patterson designated Ms. Morrison as his beneficiary in 1987. and that designation was never changed. But that was his divorce. Surely when he remarried, when we were together for 3 decades, that would have been updated automatically. Unfortunately, no. Beneficiary designations must be changed manually by the employee. And, in this case, the designation is marked as irrevocable as part of the divorce settlement. What does that mean? It means your husband couldn't change it without his ex-wife's written consent. I'm truly sorry, Mrs. Patterson. I know this isn't what you expected. I hung up and sat in my kitchen for 2 hours, staring at that letter, surrounded by broken coffee cup pieces I couldn't bring myself to clean up. This wasn't possible. Robert would never have left me with nothing. We'd planned everything together. Hadn't spoken to Linda Morrison in 15 years. At family gatherings, holidays with Robert's kids, she was like a ghost presence. The woman who'd made their father miserable, who'd tried to poison them against him during the divorce, who sent passive-aggressive Christmas cards every year with updates about her life designed to make Robert feel guilty. But I had to call her. Maybe there was some mistake, some misunderstanding. Maybe she'd be reasonable. Her number was still in Robert's old address book, written in his careful handwriting. I dialed it that evening, after 3 glasses of wine to steady my nerves. Hello? Her voice was the same. Sharp, suspicious, always ready for conflict. Linda, this is Sandra, Robert's wife. Sandra? Why are you calling me? If this is about the funeral, I got the obituary notice. I sent flowers. Linda, I'm sure you've heard about the pension situation. I received the paperwork, yes. I'm sorry for your loss, Sandra, but this is a legal matter. Robert signed those papers. Linda, I'm sure you've heard about the pension situation. I received the paperwork, yes. I'm sorry for your loss, Sandra, but this is a legal matter. Robert signed those papers. Linda, please, think about what you're doing. This money, it's all I have. Robert and I planned our entire retirement around this pension. We lived modestly for 34 years, saving every penny, counting on this security. That's not my problem. I gave up alimony rights in 1987 in exchange for the pension designation. It's a binding legal agreement. You have your own life now. You've been divorced from Robert for 28 years. You haven't spoken to him in decades. Meanwhile, I was his wife, his partner, his caregiver through his heart problems. I held his hand when he died. Look, Sandra, I don't want to be cruel, but Robert made his choice when he signed that agreement. If he wanted to change it, he had 28 years to do it. He probably forgot. It was paperwork from a painful divorce, filed away and forgotten. We never dreamed it would still be valid after all these years. Ignorance isn't an excuse. The designation is irrevocable. Linda, I'm 76 years old. I'm living on $1,200 a month in Social Security. That pension is $4,200. Without it, I can't afford my mortgage, my car, my medication. I'll have to sell our house, everything Robert and I built together. There was a long pause. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd gotten through to her. Sandra, I'm 72. I'm not wealthy either. My divorce from Robert left me with very little. I've worked minimum wage jobs for years to make ends meet. This pension is my retirement security too. But it's not yours. You're not his widow. According to the law, I am his pension beneficiary. That's what matters. Please, Linda, I'm begging you. Do the right thing here. Sign a waiver. Let the pension come to me. It's what Robert would have wanted. Then maybe Robert should have updated his paperwork before he died. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, tears streaming down my face, shaking with rage and heartbreak, and the terrible realization that I was in a fight for my survival. Found Tom Bradley through the phone book. Family law, estate planning, pension disputes. His office was in a converted house on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, but clean and professional. Tom was about 50. Kind eyes behind wire-rimmed. Glasses. The patient manner of someone who'd heard every family tragedy imaginable. He listened while I told the whole story, taking notes, asking careful questions. Mrs. Patterson, I have to be honest with you. Pension beneficiary designations are extremely difficult to overturn. The law strongly favors the original designation, especially when it's marked as irrevocable. But there has to be something, some legal recourse. There are a few potential avenues. We could argue fraud if we could prove the ex-wife concealed information. We could claim undue influence if the designation was made under coercion. We could argue changed circumstances if something fundamental shifted since the original agreement. Hutiata. Much will this cost? Tom leaned back in his chair. I'll be frank, Mrs. Patterson. A case like this could cost $15,000 to $25,000, and the odds aren't good. Most pension disputes are resolved in favor of the original beneficiary. $25,000. I had maybe $3,000 in savings. However, Tom continued, let me review the original divorce decree first. Sometimes these agreements have clauses that weren't properly followed. If I find something promising, we could work out a contingency arrangement. What does that mean? Take the case for no upfront fee. If we win, I get a percentage of the recovered benefits. If we lose, you owe me nothing. It was my only hope. Tom requested Robert's complete divorce file from the county courthouse. 3 days later, he called with news. Sandra, I found something interesting in the divorce decree. Can you come in this afternoon? Tom spread the divorce papers across his desk. The decree was 23 pages of legal language, property divisions, custody arrangements, financial obligations. But on page 12, section 8, subsection D, he'd highlighted a crucial paragraph. Pension beneficiary designation shall remain in effect, provided former spouse remains unmarried and does not enter into a domestic partnership or common law relationship. Upon remarriage or cohabitation of former spouse, designation may be modified at employee's discretion without consent. May be modified, Tom said. Not remains permanent. Robert had the legal right to change the designation if Linda remarried. Did she remarry? That's what we need to find out. I spent the next week researching Linda Morrison online. Social media didn't exist when she was younger, but I found newspaper archives, public records, property transfers. It was like detective work, following a trail of breadcrumbs through decades of someone else's life. On Thursday afternoon, searching the Springfield Herald-Times archives, I found it. A small wedding announcement from June 1994. Linda Morrison. Wed James Fletcher in a ceremony at First Methodist Church. The bride wore ivory silk and carried white roses. The couple will honeymoon in Florida before returning to Springfield, where Mr. Fletcher is employed by State Farm Insurance. She'd remarried 3 years after Robert and I got married. She'd been married for 31 years and never told the pension company. I called Tom immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. Tom, I found it. Linda remarried in June 1994. James Fletcher. Are you certain? I have the newspaper announcement right here. And Tom, I did more research. They divorced in 2018. Public records show Linda Fletcher became Linda Morrison again, after the divorce. This changes everything, Sandra. If Linda remarried without notifying the pension company, and if Robert didn't know about the marriage, we have a strong case for fraud. What do we do now? We document everything. Marriage, certificate, divorce decree. property records showing they live together. Then we demand a meeting with the pension company's legal department. But first, Tom wanted to try one more approach with Linda directly. Sometimes, when people realize they've been caught in a deception, they're willing to negotiate, rather than face a fraud investigation. He drafted a formal letter outlining our findings and Linda's legal exposure. The letter was professional but clear. She had knowingly collected pension benefits she wasn't entitled to, and we had evidence of her fraud. Linda's response came 3 days later, not from her directly, but from a lawyer named Patricia Holbrook. Mr. Bradley, my client disputes your allegations. The pension designation was legal when made and remains valid. Ms. Morrison's personal relationships are irrelevant to the pension agreement. Cease all contact with my client. She's hired a lawyer, Tom said when he called. That tells us she knows she's in trouble. People don't spend money on attorneys when they're confident in their legal position. So what happens now? Now we take it to the pension company and let them sort it out. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday in November at Midwest Manufacturing's corporate headquarters in Detroit. Tom and I drove up together, my stomach churning with nerves and anticipation. The building was intimidating. 30 stories, of glass and steel, marble lobby, security guards, everything designed to make ordinary people feel small and powerless. But I'd come too far to be intimidated now. We were shown to a conference room on the 15th floor. Long table, leather chairs, windows overlooking the Detroit River. Present were 2 pension company lawyers, a human resources director, and a claims investigator. Linda arrived with her, attorney Patricia Holbrook, looking nervous for the first time since I'd known her. Tom laid out our case methodically. The remarriage clause in the original divorce decree, Linda's 1994 marriage to James Fletcher, her failure to notify the pension company of her change in status, the 24 years she lived as Linda Fletcher while claiming rights to Robert Patterson's pension. The pension company's lead attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca Chen, asked pointed questions. Mrs. Fletcher, you were aware of the remarriage clause in your divorce settlement with Mr. Patterson? Linda's voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. It was so long ago. The divorce was complicated. I may not have remembered every detail. But you did remarry Mr. Fletcher in 1994? Yes. And you lived as husband and wife for 24 years? Yes. During that time, did you ever notify Midwest Manufacturing that your marital status had changed? Linda looked at her lawyer, who nodded. Slightly. No, I didn't. Rebecca Chen made notes. According to the original decree, your remarriage should have triggered a notification to the pension administrator, correct? Robert never contacted me about changing the designation. I assumed he was satisfied with the arrangement. Mrs. Fletcher, Tom interjected. How would Robert know about your remarriage if you never told him? We weren't in communication. Exactly. So he had no way of knowing his legal right to modify the designation had been triggered by your marriage. To Mr. Fletcher. The room was silent except for the scratching of pens on legal pads. Rebecca Chen spoke carefully. Mrs. Fletcher, this appears to be a case of material non-disclosure. You had a legal obligation to notify this company when circumstances changed that affected your beneficiary status. Linda's attorney tried to defend her. My client's personal relationships were private matters. There was no explicit requirement to notify the pension administrator. Actually, there was, Rebecca Chen said, pulling out another document. All pension beneficiaries sign acknowledgement forms, stating they'll report any changes in circumstances that might affect their designation. Mrs. Fletcher signed this form in 1987. The evidence was overwhelming. Linda had committed fraud, pure and simple. The pension company's decision came 2 weeks later in a formal letter. They were immediately transferring Robert's pension designation to me as his legal widow. They would begin recovery proceedings for the 7 months of payments Linda had improperly received, $29,400 plus interest. Linda's attorney called Tom the day after the decision. My client is prepared to return the benefits she received, but she wants assurance there will be no criminal fraud charges filed. Tom looked at me across his desk. It's your call, Sandra. We could push for criminal prosecution. I thought about it for a long time. Linda was 72, probably scared, facing financial ruin. Part of me wanted revenge for the months of stress, the fear, the sense of betrayal, but mostly I was just tired. I want my pension and the money returned, I told Tom. Beyond that, I just want this to be over. The pension company cut me a check for $29,400 in recovered benefits plus $1,147 in interest. My first regular pension, payment of $4,200, arrived the following month, deposited automatically into the checking account Robert and I had shared for 34 years. I used part of the recovered money to finally take the trip Robert and I had always planned. To see the Grand Canyon. I scattered some of his ashes there at sunset, looking out over that vast, beautiful landscape he'd dreamed of seeing. Standing there, watching the sun paint those ancient rocks in shades of gold and red, I felt Robert's presence strongly. Not sad or regretful, but proud. Proud that I'd fought for what was right. Proud that I hadn't let fear or age or grief stop me from demanding justice. People ask me if I feel guilty about taking Linda to court. If I think I was too harsh on an old woman who was scared about money. The truth is, I don't feel guilty at all. For 7 months, I ate ramen noodles for dinner and kept my thermostat at 62 degrees, while she collected $4,200 every month from a man she divorced 28 years ago. She made her choice to hide her marriage. She made her choice to commit fraud. I just made sure the consequences finally caught up with her. The pension check comes every month now, reliable as sunrise. It's not just money. It's dignity, security, respect for the 34 years Robert and I built together. It's justice for a good man who deserved better than to have his legacy stolen by someone from his past. I'm 76 years old, and I learned something important about myself in those months of fighting. I'm stronger than I thought, tougher than people assume when they see a gray-haired woman using coupons at the grocery store. When you've lived 76 years, you don't have time to be polite to people who are trying to steal from you. And sometimes when the world thinks you should just be quiet and fade away, fighting back is the most important thing you can do.